Welcome back. You're watching Political Exchange, where we continue our discussion with South Africa's Trade and Industry Minister, Rob Davies. Minister, I'm looking at the communique and the specific clauses on trade and investment relations. It speaks here about, the fact that the parties agreed to cement growth by remaining committed to open and transparent trade rules in line, of course, with bilateral and multilateral commitments. And then it says here, very importantly, and to refrain from taking protectionist measures. Now, of course, we have adopted industrialization as a policy. Many people argue that it's a fancy word for protectionist measures. You've been often projected as a protectionist. What does the word protectionist measures here mean exactly, particularly if one looks at your decision to scrap those bilateral trade agreements?
Well, I think the question of the bilateral trade agreements, I'll come on to that in a minute, has got nothing to do with commitments against protectionism. From our side, I think we say that in the international trade rules, there is space for countries to make autonomous policy decisions if there is allowable water, as it's called, between the bound rates, WTO bound rates, and the currently applied tariff rates. And so from time to time we have exercised our option where the evidence tells us, in the interest of industrial development, to raise some tariffs if we have room between our bound and applied rates. We've taken that decision. And we've also taken a decision on a line-by-line basis where the evidence leads us to that conclusion to lower tariffs. So I think that we would want to continue to insist that we have the right to apply our tariff policy in that regard. Where we're talking about protectionism, we're saying that we're not going to break any rules. We're not going to use any extraordinary measures. We are, I think, also talking very much about some of the things that came up in the discussion around sanitary and phytosanitary issues. We had a particular matter of citrus black spot where yes, the rules of the game about the presence of this particular disease on the peel of citrus fruit, we managed to resolve that. But at one stage there was a threat that if there were 5 interceptions on the European Union side, they could act, and on the worst case scenario they could stop our exports, where there were 40,000 permanent jobs and 40,000 temporary jobs at stake. So I think that the commitment is a commitment both ways, and it includes I think a lot of these issues of technical barriers to trade as well as direct tariffs. Mm-hmm. But yes, I think the issue of the bilateral investment treaties is a different story. That is, those are investment protection agreements that we signed as South Africa, largely between the period of our democratic transition and the finalization of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And we signed these as a confidence boosting exercise when there was quite a bit of uncertainty about the direction of our democratic government. And a number of these are actually coming up to their maturity date. And when they come up to their maturity date, you face the option, either you decide to let the agreement lapse, or you are then bound to roll over the agreement for another decade, for another 10 years. Now, since the signature of those, we've got the Constitution in place. There is a very robust protection that's offered under the Constitution against expropriation without compensation. There is a very robust overall climate in South Africa of protecting the rights of investors. We are working on a new investment protection, a new investment act ourselves, which would provide extensive protection not just to investors from the few countries that we negotiated bilateral agreements with, but all investors. And I think that here it's important to take note that we do not have a bilateral investment treaty, for example, with the United States, right, which has more than 600 companies that are involved in the South African economy.
So, Minister,
and conversely, we have investment protection agreements with a number of countries from whom we have almost no investment. So what we were saying to the EU is that we're not actually intending to withdraw effective protection from any investors, but we are modernizing our regime, and we have exercised the option which we have not to renew treaties as they become due.
So why did it make so many people so nervous? Why did it almost overshadow the summit itself?
I think that there was very little that we noticed from any actual investors about concerns when this had happened. I mean, for example, the last one was the agreement with Spain. I myself met with the Secretary of State from Spain when he was here for the bilateral consultations. We explained the issue to them. He had been meeting Spanish companies that were involved in South Africa, and he informed me that many of them wanted to increase their presence in the South African market. I think we had a set of perceptions that were articulated in the public forum by the Commissioner de Groot, and that probably provoked a number of companies to begin to think about and have some concerns about a matter that many of them had no concerns about before. So I think it's largely a matter of perception, largely a matter of explanation. But to repeat, South Africa offers robust protection for investors, will continue to do so, and our modernization of our investment protection regime, the extensive protection we offer under the Constitution is not on the table, is not going to be changed, and I think that in practice no investors will notice any discernible impact whatsoever in terms of their real involvement in the South African economy.
Now, prior to the summit, I had discussions with several EU officials, including the EU ambassador Roland de Geer, and there was a sense, even if it was tacitly expressed, that there is some kind of concern around policy consistency from the South African government. And of course, the tone of these discussions are often that the subtext is that, you know, they don't know exactly where you are going. The fact that you are a Central Committee member of the South African Communist Party that is often pushed for greater state involvement, greater state protection around our industries is often raised, you know, as a kind of concern, if you like, often expressed in quite hushed tones. Minister, are you satisfied that the policy trajectory in terms of South Africa's trade policy and regime is clear enough, consistent enough for investors to be comfortable that they're not going to, you know, come to South Africa and a few years down the line, the rules of the game may well change dramatically?
Well, I think that you know, this is sometimes the concern we may pick up from media. Now you're also telling me that it was articulated by the EU ambassador. Well, he never came and expressed that to us. But I think that many of the investors that we talk to will raise all kinds of other issues. Many investors, particularly investors in the real economy and value-added activities, are realizing that their prospects in their home base in the European Union are not as good as they looked a few years ago, whereas those in Africa are looking brighter, that South Africa is a critical part of the African continent and of integration in the African continent, and are looking to increase their presence in South Africa. That's what we've seen. We've seen a growing trend which has led to 162 billion rands worth of investment over the life of this administration, which I've been the Minister of Trade and Industry, if you want to put it that way as well. That has happened during the life of this administration. So I think that in real terms, we offer an attractive prospect for investors. We give investors not just policy certainty on many issues, but also we provide them with a lot of incentives as a result of our industrial policy programs. Incentives apply to entrants, for example, our 12I tax incentives and things of that sort. So I think that's part of the story. But then also there's policy uncertainty the other way. What is the game in terms of sanitary and phytosanitary regulations in Europe? The black spot, citrus black spot issue I mentioned earlier. I think the opportunities we have every now and again to engage, we're able to clarify positions to each other, and I think that's the importance of these interactions. I've also supported the idea that we should have a permanent structure, not just an occasional meeting of a EU South Africa business forum as we've had for the last 2 years, but we have a more permanent structure in place so there can be an ongoing discussion between business organizations from Europe and South Africa. And as government, we're very happy to engage and to have in-depth discussions with investors from all over the world, including from the European Union.
Now, of course, the focus on the Business Council was very much part of this EU-South Africa summit. And of course, we saw with BRICS, you also had the emphasis on the Business Council being set up. Greater kind of tandem, if you like, between government and the private sector. Minister, from where you're sitting, the discussions that you had with on the Business Council, is there an appreciation for your position that a more permanent structure be formed? Is there enthusiasm? Are people keen for the structure to meet, in more than an ad hoc fashion?
Well, as you indicated, the BRICS had a business forum, and the decision was taken at the BRICS summit this year that there would be a business council on ongoing structure. That decision has not yet been taken at the level of the EU South Africa. I think there are some discussions of moving in that direction. There was some talk about some sort of a permanent secretariat. It's ultimately the call of the business organizations. I know the business organizations on the South African side are keen for that to happen, and I believe that some of the organizations on the EU side are as well. So hopefully we can, in the near future, see a permanently existing structure. I think the importance of that is that you have a forum. It meets the day before the summit. Its findings were transmitted into the summit. But a lot of what goes on in the summit has already been the subject of negotiation and discussion that took place before. So if you really want to impact on the decisions and discussions in the summit, you need an ongoing permanent structure in place, and we would welcome such a move in the EU-South Africa business engagement.
Mm-hmm. Minister, I noticed also in the final communique a lot of emphasis, of course, on job creation, a centerpiece of the discussions at the summit, given the fact that in South Africa we have particularly stubborn unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, and of course many European countries having the same troubles. You look at a country like Spain, where its youth unemployment figures very similar to South Africa. Was there a greater appreciation between the delegations of the similarities in some instances of the problem, and what were the kinds of measures that you were discussing to try and focus on the question of creating employment, particularly looking at youth employment and jobs for young people?
Well, yes, I mean, the theme of the summit was job creation through inward investment. So that was the entire theme of the summit. But indeed, I think one of the areas that we became aware of was that there are a number of programs in the European Union, particularly around training, skills development, job matching, those kinds of things, where we think that there's quite a bit to learn from the European Union. And there are some of those parts of the final communique are indicating that we will be cooperating, we will be learning from them, we will be receiving support from them, and learning from some of their programs. And indeed there are a number of parts of our program where they're also interested in learning from us. So I think that's the way we agreed on those matters.
Mm-hmm. Final question, Minister. The relationship, of course, between the EU and South Africa happening against changing global trade patterns. South Africa very much focused on emerging markets, very active in BRICS. Of course, mindful always that the EU as a bloc remains our largest trading partner. A little fine, delicate balance for you to walk, obviously. Do you think that we're getting it right? Do you think that we're balancing our interests, watering all our roots, so to speak, both in the developed and the developing world?
Well, I think we're certainly trying to do that. We've never said that our strengthened relations with the emerging economies is something which is to spite or to at the expense of strengthening our ties with our existing partners. But I think that President Obama put it quite well when he visited, and he told us that now Africa's got a diversity of trade and investment partners, and I think that diversity is welcome. That diversity enables us to make choices from time to time. Of course, Europe remains by far our largest trade and investment partner, and therefore we've got to work at that relationship. But I already gave you the trade figures. Our exports to Europe have not been increasing over the last 5 years. We've had to go out and seek opportunities elsewhere, wherever they are, and that's what we've been doing.
Well, of course.